The Singapore government is ramping up efforts to advance the country's nascent aquaculture sector, and the aim is to help local farmers breed stronger lines of fish and fund programs to better monitor water conditions. The city-state is looking to Australia's best practices to glean some insights, and Choo reports from Perth, Australia.
It's the land of pristine coastlines and thriving marine biodiversity. This is a vastly different landscape from Singapore's, but under the surface lies important lessons for the island nation.
Good animal husbandry is actually a very key and crucial part of their sustainable operations.
Among challenges faced by the Republic's fledgling aquaculture sector is the high fish stock mortality rate. Senior Minister of State for Sustainability and the Environment, Koh Poh Koon, says some traditional fish farms in Singapore report a rate as high as 70%.
And that is a very, very high number, whereas compared to many of the Australian farms here which has good husbandry practices, their stock losses are typically in the range of 10% or less. And I think it speaks to how the business itself needs to actually adopt a science-based approach to animal husbandry, not just to be giving welfare to the animals that they are growing, but also to make sure that they preserve their stock capacity. So as they say, prevention is better than cure.
It's challenges like this that brought government officials, business people and members of the press from Singapore to both southern and western Australia. Singapore is looking to its veterinary science experts to equip local farms with the technical tools to adopt better fish keeping practices. The island state is also studying how Australia uses a nutrient budget to strike a balance between nutrient content and fish health.
What they have consistently pointed out is that if there are too much dissolved nutrients in the water, it can lead to problems because it means that harmful algae can also grow in there, and that itself can then threaten the fish stock by lowering the oxygen content in the water. In order to make sure this whole body of water is sustainable, farmers ought to be conscious about how much fish they put inside, but also how they feed the fish.
And because one farmer's feeding practices can affect another sharing the same body of water, legislation may be considered to manage this and level the playing field.
Given today's nascent sector, if we do not have some regulations to guide a proper use of feeding and stocking, it may be difficult for the industry themselves to self-regulate. So we will have to think about whether we want to put some enabling legislation as a form of guide to the industry to develop themselves sustainably.
As Singapore ramps up production of locally grown food, Dr. Koh says the country will look closer at funding water monitoring, something the Australians pride themselves in.
One of the things we learn here is that they do undertake a more comprehensive set of monitoring of water quality, including dissolved nitrogen, nutrients, and maybe even other form of parameters. So we will undertake this study with many of our technical agencies that incorporate what the academics and the scientific community can bring on board as well, to see how we can roll out a more comprehensive series of monitoring regime.
He says this is where industry players and academia can work with the government, which could provide some enabling grants. The trip organised by the Singapore Food Agency comes as the nation is working to strengthen its food security by producing 30% of its food locally by 2030. Choo, CNA, Perth.